Want to watch this session again, it will be recorded and posted tomorrow with the rest of the conference content, and that will become available tomorrow morning to all of y'all. So now on to our live session. So in this session, Greg is going to discuss several different considerations you want to make while planning a donation garden. So whether you're wanting to grow enough to donate a lot or a little, Greg has some great advice for you. In his presentation, he will cover garden size, crop selection, labor and material inputs, harvesting windows, and food handling and safe and storage information. So remember, Greg is located in Austin, Texas. That's the USDA Plant Hardiness Zone 8B. Dallas-Fort Worth, we tend to vary between 7B and 8A, depending on if you're in the city or on the outskirts. So if you're elsewhere in the country, you'll want to figure out what your plant hardiness zone is for any plant-specific information that Greg's going to share today. But most of his advice will translate well to any garden that is looking to donate produce. So a little about Greg. He loves plants and spends as much time gardening as possible. He currently has the best job in the world as garden manager at the Central Texas Food Bank. I might have to fight him on that one. I might have the best job, so we'll have to fight that one out. But he runs a 1-acre urban farm there that pairs food production for hunger relief with educational programming to teach people how to grow their own food and use it. So Greg, I will turn it over to you, and I know he's got a presentation to share, so we will give him a minute to get situated.
Well, hello everybody, and Becca, thank you for that introduction. My name is Greg, and I'm very honored to be able to be here. So thank you for taking some time out of your day, and I hope that this will be at least interesting and at best useful to you. I do have a PowerPoint kind of slide deck that I'm going to go through. My preference, of course, would be that we were in the same room together. That's not possible. So please, if you do have any questions or comments, just go ahead and put them in the chat box, and Becca will pop in and sort of be your avatar in talking with me. I do love conversation with the audience, so please feel free to interject any kind of comments or questions, and we'll try to address them. I'm going to go ahead and share my PowerPoint here. Let's see here. So Becca, can you guys see that? Is that going to work?
Yep, everything looks great.
Okay, great. Well, so just getting started here, the title of the presentation, of course, is Planning a Donation Garden. And this is what I usually look like. I put on a clean shirt today, but most of the time I spend out in the garden getting really hot and sweaty and filthy, which is kind of how I like to be. My job title here is Garden Manager. I started in November of 2016, but really, you know, I've devoted my professional life to trying to figure out how people get food, where it comes from, why do we choose to eat the things that we eat, and how can we improve both the health from a nutritional standpoint, but also the sustainability and environmental kind of impacts of our diet. Education-wise, I have a master's in geography from Texas State, and undergrad was environmental studies and German from Southwestern University, but also an ISA certified arborist. So I like to talk about trees in German and then make maps of it, I guess. But most of my kind of interest in all of those things has, as I said, been around food. And so my master's research that kind of ended up leading into some of the jobs that I've had since then was on community gardens in Austin. And so community gardening is really near and dear to my heart. Many of you, I would assume, are involved in community gardens, or at least maybe have an interest in community gardens. I think they're wonderful spaces that really have a lot of benefits. And so my job here at the food bank, I'm not really managing a community garden, but it is a garden for the community. And so the things that I talk about will be hopefully somewhat relevant to you. All right, so the topics that we'll go over, we have garden size, crop selection, labor and material inputs, harvest windows, food handling and storage. Biggest question that you want to ask, right, is how big should you make your garden? And I am definitely guilty of wanting to build big gardens. It's very easy to draw a big garden on a piece of paper and imagine all of the wonderful things. Of course, you will in fact get more food from a small, well-maintained garden than a big, unmaintained garden. And this is something that I've had to learn many, many times. So these are the 3 gardens that I currently am responsible for. This top one here, 400 square feet, that's in my front yard. Bottom left is a donation garden for the food pantry at my church. And then the bottom right is the garden here at the Central Texas Food Bank. You'll notice it says 20,000 square feet. We have about 20,000 square feet of growing space devoted to vegetables. The remainder of our acre is teaching garden elements, which are growing food, but they're set up very differently. And then we have an orchard and a lot of wildlife habitat, wildflowers and herbs and perennials. We have some water features, a greenhouse, and a lot of pathways. So about a little under half an acre, it's like 0.4 acres of straight rows of vegetables, and then the remainder in all different kinds of other stuff. So those are pretty different sizes of gardening spaces. I spend about 2 to 3 hours a week in my front yard garden, and that's averaged out over the course of the year. So any of you who are avid gardeners will know, of course, the work is very cyclical and seasonal. And so sometimes during the spring and fall, there's quite a bit of work preparing that area and getting it ready to plant. And then, right now, I'm not doing much, just kind of go out and pick stuff every once in a while. This bottom left garden is a donation plot that's a brand new garden this past year at our food pantry. And that space, I wanted to put in something that I knew would be very easy to maintain, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to get over there and maintain it and work in the garden a lot. And it's very fortunate that we did, because I planned all of that pre-COVID. And so it really has not received much attention. This picture actually is our total harvest from that space for the year, which is, it's great. Watermelons, we got some butternut squash and a couple of cucumbers. The tall corn here, I was just doing an experiment. That's regular old number 5 yellow or number 2 yellow dent corn. I'd never tried to grow it before, and so I just kind of tried to grow it, and it worked. But 1,200 square feet, just the labor to plant it. I didn't even water it or weed it or anything. We just went over there, did a lot of work to get it ready to plant, and then have mostly ignored it for about 6 months. The food bank garden, a huge amount of work, 40 to 120 hours a week, including volunteer hours. And if I look at the total amount of food and divide that by how many servings of vegetables we're supposed to eat in a given day or year, I'm estimating that it feeds about 30 people's worth of fruits and vegetables for the year, compared to my front yard feeds my family of 4, not 100% of our fruits and vegetables, but a very large portion of it. So you can see on a square foot, hours per square foot basis, this smallest garden is vastly more productive than either of the larger gardens. And I would encourage you to consider that. More size equals more effort, money, and resources. This is a little budget that I've put together. We use this in our adult gardening classes. And this is kind of just a sample budget based on getting materials from a local hardware store that I priced out. This was about 1.5 to 2 years ago that I last priced it out. So they may have gone up a little bit. I don't, these building materials change in price a little bit all the time. So you can see for a sample 3x8 raised bed, you're looking at in the order of $500 to install, and then about $40-ish a year, kind of at a minimum, to maintain. So I didn't put the next table from that presentation into this, but it'll take you probably a year and a half to 2 years with average yields to recoup that investment. If you just compare the cost of what you're able to grow with how much it costs to buy it at the grocery store, it's going to cost a little bit. Now, this is probably one of the most expensive styles of construction, right? You have to buy all of the materials and buying all of the soil and buying transplants. And there's much cheaper ways of doing that in ground, right? So I'm not going to go into great detail on garden construction, but I did want to point out raised bed is not the only thing in the world. And that can tend to be the sort of go-to construction style when people want to build a garden. Gives you initial kind of immediate visual impact, but I think it has a lot of downsides in Central Texas. I would assume so in North Texas in terms of added watering, and we get a lot of fire ants and Bermuda grass, and man, if you've ever had a cinder block garden, those holes in the cinder block are just perfect habitat for fire ants and Bermuda grass, and then it is a real pain to get rid of. So I would suggest going with an in-ground garden if you can. The initial labor is pretty intense, but in the long run, it's going to be less labor. It's going to be cheaper. It's going to be easier to maintain, and you have less watering, which is a daily kind of thing with a container garden or a raised bed garden. This picture here, this is the side of one of our raised beds that we have. It's actually framed up to be ADA accessible, ADA height. So it's 3.5 feet tall or 3 feet tall. And we built that with some, you can kind of imagine a stick framed house almost. And then we put 2 layers of wire mesh and 2 layers of landscaping fabric, a non-woven landscaping fabric. That's very important. And then you're able to plant directly into that vertical face. So you can put in a lot of kind of sun-loving things, things that really like a lot of drainage, and it expands your growing space. It looks nice too. So in terms of crop selection, once you have your garden space picked out, your construction technique, you're going to want to think about what to grow. And again, it kind of comes back to labor as well as expense, so infrastructure or handling needs. Of course, client preference is important. You don't want to grow things that people don't want to eat. And then you want to grow things that are going to really have a big impact in terms of their yield. So crop selection, soil prep and construction, not only constructing the garden beds, but some things take a lot of work to prepare the soil. And so if you're going to grow really long, straight carrots, you've got to get that soil loose for good 18 inches. And that's going to take a lot of physical effort. Frequency of harvest, you got to think about how often are you going to be able to get out there to harvest this stuff before it goes bad. And that also, you want to take into account the harvest window, which we'll talk about a little bit as well. So okra is a great example of a crop that I love to eat. It grows well during the hottest time of the year when there's not a lot else to really be growing. But you got to be out there every day picking okra. And I don't really like to pick okra because it gives me a rash and you don't get very much from it. So I've had a 100-foot bed of okra, and over the course of the season we get a lot of okra, but what that means is we're out there 4 days a week picking 5 pounds of okra at a time, and it can be pretty unmotivating to do that. I also want you to think about the intensity of the harvest labor. So sweet potatoes are a great example of a crop that's extremely productive, has great storage characteristics in that it doesn't have to be refrigerated. It's amazingly nutritious. People really like it. Grows during the hottest part of the year when nothing else is growing. But if you've ever tried to go harvest sweet potatoes on any kind of large scale out of the ground, it is a pain. If you got a bad back or bad knees or something, don't grow sweet potatoes because they're going to sit in the ground. And if you don't get all those sweet potatoes out, they're going to turn into a terrible weed. So I love sweet potatoes. We are not able to grow sweet potatoes here because of some pests, but it's something that I, as a strapping young man, would love to grow, but it may not be appropriate for you. So the other thing is time-consuming crops. So cherry tomatoes, again, people love them, but it's a lot of work to go out there and pick all those little marbles off of the vine. And so, a larger tomato might be in order, or a pepper plant, something like that. Or maybe cherry tomatoes. You got a bunch of people that want to get out there and pick cherry tomatoes. That's great. There's no wrong crop. It's just important to think about all of those characteristics before you plant it. Infrastructure. Do your crops require washing and refrigeration? Do you need to buy bags, plastic clamshells, rubber bands? Once you harvest this stuff, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to wash your harvesting equipment? These are important questions because let's say you plant something like spinach or baby lettuce. It's all well and good. I like eating salads. What are you going to do with that stuff? If you just walk into a food bank with a trash bag full of warm lettuce that's covered in sand, it's going to go in the dumpster 30 seconds after you leave. I hate to say it, but you got to think about what is the kind of the lifespan of handling of this. And so the food bank, and I'll touch on this again, the food bank is going to refrigerate pretty much everything you give them. If something does not benefit from refrigeration, then that can damage it. Conversely, if you don't have the ability to refrigerate it, and your pantry that you're going to be growing for only distributes on Fridays, but you're going to go harvest on Tuesday, then all of your stuff is going to go to waste. So you got to think about all the steps of that food through the lifespan before you plant anything. And washing is also important. We'll touch on that a little bit later as well. Client preference, that I think can be somewhat overlooked. Certainly, historically in food banking, we have sought to provide kind of quantities of food and perhaps had the expectation that people will take whatever we give them. And that is an assumption that I think we need to entirely move away from and start thinking about how can we honor the whole personhood? How can we provide these people who are in some ways our customers, our guests, our honored clientele with food that honors their humanity in its entirety. That's very important to me in the garden because we're not going to grow 1 million pounds of food. So I want to grow food that is, $1 million food or whatever, just like really awesome stuff. Part of that is making sure that it's relevant to people's backgrounds. We want to find ways to grow things that are going to be not available in the food bank inventory as a whole, or that could be exciting for people to get so that they want to eat more fruits and vegetables. Traditional foods, if there's a specific ethnic group or refugee population or immigrant population that is frequenting a pantry that you're going to be growing for, talk to people. See what are the foods that they want that they're not able to get otherwise. See if you can grow them. It can be really exciting. We have very hot weather in Texas. we're able to grow a lot of Middle Eastern crops that you'll never see at the grocery store. We have a large Arabic-speaking population at one of our pantries, and so I can take our Malokia up to the Arabic-speaking mobile pantry distribution, and people get really excited about it. Same thing, we have some Armenian cucumbers, really long, big cucumbers. People love to see that because it's kind of unusual. Everybody loves fruit and tomatoes, you know, across the world. So you can't go wrong with watermelon and tomatoes. And I would say steer clear of things that are maybe kind of fun to grow, but require some sort of unusual preparation, like burdock or cardoons or something. Even artichokes here, which I love artichokes, that's my spirit vegetable. And we'll always grow a little bit of artichokes just because I'm kind of an artichoke evangelist. Hey, you know what? It takes 45 minutes to boil them, and then it's a lot of trouble to eat them. We're not going to grow a lot of artichokes. Finally, yield. We've got, excuse me. Focus on portions, not potions. Portions and value as opposed to just pounds. And so I want to open up this little website here, which is what we use to kind of extrapolate the number of portions from the pounds of food that we're able to grow. So this is the, as you can see, USDA Food Buying Guide for Child Nutrition Programs. And we're just gonna come in here and pretend to be a school, which is fine. Now you can come over here, search for a food. So let's do, how about carrots. So we see here, carrots, 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 fresh, without tops, purchase unit, servings per unit, and then kind of information on preparation. So if you know that people are going to take this and chop it up into pieces and eat it raw, then you can estimate it's about 10.6 pounds of, servings per pound of fresh carrots without the green tops on. And so something that I want to point out here is this is a 1/4 cup serving, which is half of the size of an adult serving. All of these serving size over here, these are all going to be half of the size of an adult serving. So if you want to think about how many people are you serving, how many meals or how many people are eating from your garden, you can come over here and look at the things that you're growing. Think about the yield, think about how it might be eaten, and extrapolate out. So I would have, for this one here, 5.3 servings per pound, because I'm going to use adult servings for carrots. And when I'm doing my crop planning and thinking about what I want to grow and the yield per foot and how long things take to grow, I can kind of take that into consideration as well. And I'm going to go back to my presentation now. Let's see if I can figure out how. So this link here will be available in the slides. You can also just Google Food Buying Guide for Child Nutrition Programs. I'm looking at the chat here. Spirit vegetable. Yeah, that's a question I ask my volunteers a lot. I get some interesting answers. I sometimes give carrots to the pantry without tops. Usually I have it with tops. You can eat the tops, make kind of a pesto out of them. I also think they look really nice. And then to pull the tops off is extra work, which I don't always have the time to do. So this crop list here, this is the top yielding crops over the last 3 years of growing. And so you can see Armenian cucumbers here are extremely high yielding per foot. And I've tracked the dollar value of my crops as well, just using kind of HEB.com. I go and look and see how much stuff costs. You can't buy an Armenian cucumber at HEB, so I just use a regular cucumber. And then I kind of look at how long they're in the field and how much did they generate. And the reason that I do this is I want to understand in some ways the impact that this program and this food is having on the people that we serve. And if I can grow something that's gonna put $10 worth of food in somebody's pocket, or I can do $1 worth of food in their pocket, I'm gonna probably go with the more expensive one because I feel like that's gonna have a bigger impact on their life. You can see some things in here are a little bit surprising, like garlic, 0.4 pounds per foot. Now it takes a long time to grow garlic, so you end up with a relatively low dollars per foot for field day. But fresh garlic is really tasty, and I've had a lot of positive feedback from people. So it's something that doesn't take much effort to grow. You can use it. It's very versatile. It's used in many cultures around the world, and it costs a fair amount at the grocery store as well. So it's kind of a nice thing. The Armenian cucumber is a little bit of an outlier. I like to grow it because it is just so phenomenally productive, but they can get like 3 feet long and about this big around, which is more cucumber than most people want to eat. I really like cucumber, but not everybody wants to eat a 30-pound cucumber. So, you know, I like to say there's no good and bad, but here's good and bad. So squash, any kind of squash, winter squash, summer squash, it's great. People like it. It stores well. It's really productive. It's pretty nutritious. It's very accessible to many different kind of cultural backgrounds. You can cook it in a lot of different ways. Garlic, again, similar. Melons, you know, like I said, fruit. Everybody loves fruit. Carrots are good. Tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers. Some of the things that all of these have in common is that they're very versatile. They don't require special handling in terms of refrigeration and washing. And they have a fairly wide or long harvest window. So a winter squash, you can harvest it. I mean, there's probably a 30-day harvest window on a winter squash. Garlic, similar. Melons, you know, you've got about a week. Carrots, probably a month. Tomatoes and peppers a little bit shorter. Cucumbers a little bit shorter. But there's, you know, at least several days in there where you can harvest them. What I'm going to call bad crops are things that really don't handle well. Baby lettuce and arugula. Hey, Becca, what's up?
Oh, hey, we had a question. Dawn would like to know, she's growing muskmelon, and she's worried that people won't eat it when they open up and see that it's green. Do you have any suggestions on a way that maybe she could market that to the pantry clients or help kind of alleviate that concern?
Yeah, is it like a Galia melon or something that's a green-fleshed muskmelon?
I believe so. Probably like a honeydew or something like that.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, cool. It's cantaloupe but green. Some of those are, in my opinion, better tasting than the orange ones. I would just print something off and say, green when ripe, or, you know. Now I want it, what variety is it? Can you type it in? We do a lot of education around the food that we distribute. We have, much like you do, Becca, kind of flyers and handouts about different produce items. And I don't have one shared here. Let me see if I can pull one up real quick. Uh-oh. I goofed it up.
That's okay. We can do a little discussion. If you want to search for that, the recipe or handout you were going to share, I can also kind of chime in here. So Greg and I are pretty much counterparts of each other at different food banks. And so I know both of our gardens donate to food pantries as well. And so you can do a little education like Greg is gonna show you here in just a minute, with some recipes or some good signage. I like your suggestion about ripe when green, because I mean, that's easy enough for a volunteer at a pantry to take that information and pass that on to clients. We've also we have somebody on our team who does recipe handouts for different programming, and she even did one for that carrot top pesto you were talking about, Greg. And so just, giving people an option of, something they can try, because if it is unfamiliar, they're still not going to take it even if it's given to them. So I think that's great. So Greg, I'll let you continue.
Oh, well, so this is our version of your kitchen garden cooking school, which we are, I should have asked you this. We're going to steal a name. It's a great name. So this is one that we have put together for beets, and we just talk about, hey, this is a beet, and this is the nutrition information, some kind of little fun facts about it, and then just very basic preparation information about it as well. And, we've had a lot of positive feedback on this. We've got probably we're going to be doing probably 2 or 3 different produce items for each month of the year based on what's in season from our garden. And so, that's something you could do. This is obviously a little bit more involved than maybe if you have just a few melon plants. But I do think that even printing something out as simple as just ripe when green can be really quite helpful. Does that answer your question at all?
I think so. And I'm going to connect, John, I'll go ahead and connect you with the North Texas Food Bank as well. They also have some really good recipe handouts, and you would be in their service area. But I can connect you with, oh, okay, great. So they probably have lots of handouts, Emily, and I can get I'll send y'all the contact information to get on our distribution list as well. Tarrant Area Food Bank also has an online recipe library also. So those you could download and print if you would like.
We have an online recipe database as well, and these produce fact sheets are not available yet, but we're working on that. We need to kind of redo our website. So baby lettuce and arugula, I would just urge you to stay away from that. It has a very short shelf life, and lettuce is far and away the most dangerous vegetable in terms of a food safety standpoint. Basil and okra, which grow great in the summer, and basil especially, man, I don't know why I can't get anybody to take it. And the other thing is, if you put it in the fridge, it turns black. It looks really gross. So if you know the people at your pantry are going to be able to keep it unrefrigerated and keep it fresh, and that people are going to take it, then it's a great crop. But if you're not certain about that, I would avoid it. And then other things that are just kind of really unusual, like purslane or aloe or these little orange Turkish eggplants. I mean, they're kind of fun to grow, but unless you know for certain that people want that, I would steer clear. Other things to avoid. I mean, we really this is just images from our inventory. We get vast, ungodly quantities of cabbage, carrots, onions, and potatoes. And Becca, I don't know if you would echo that or not, but my understanding is that our customers are getting even kind of somewhat tired of cabbage, onion, carrots, and potatoes, and that they really appreciate some diversity in there. They're also really cheap to buy. And so from an economic standpoint, you want to have a bigger impact on people, giving them fresh peppers and cucumbers and tomatoes and radishes or salad turnips or something might be a better way to go as well.
Hey, we have another question. So we haven't done this at our garden, but Denise would like to know if you've ever grown plants such as herbs in pots to give out at food pantries.
Yes and no. So we have done that a little bit. I would say more frequently we have gotten donations of plants from local wholesale nurseries and then redistributed those. And so, you know, the food bank, what we're really good at is taking lots of stuff and then redistributing it. And so we have received donations from a local wholesale vegetable start nursery. They'll give us 1,000 plants, and then we can take those and redistribute those at some of our mobile pantries. Now that model has declined with coronavirus because we've gone to drive-through, so there's not as much opportunity for that interaction. But hopefully we'll resume that in the future. Labor and materials. So questions to ask yourself. Yeah, you're very welcome. To ask yourself, how often will you be working in your garden? How often will you be able to harvest and donate? What kind of tools do you need? Harvest containers is a really big thing. If you're going to be harvesting into a nice reusable container that you want to get back, make sure that you have a plan for getting that back, because many food pantries are mission focused and scrappy, and they will take your harvest tub because they're good containers. So keep a hold of them. The other thing to kind of split the hair on is if you're going to be donating to the food bank or the food pantry, or just kind of finding people in need to give it away to. And I would suggest that you go as low on the food chain as possible. If you have a couple of neighbors that you know don't have enough to eat, grow some food and give it to your neighbors. That's the best thing you can do. If you don't want to go that route, you know, going to a local food pantry and developing that relationship is going to be also a really good way to go. You know, find out when they're doing their distributions, talk to them about, you know, who the constituency is, go to those distributions, meet people, talk about what they want. Growing specifically for the food bank, of course, that's my full-time job, so it's not a bad thing to do, but do you have a lot of food? You know, it can be difficult to integrate the small amounts of food that are coming out of a garden into the stream of material that's flowing through the food bank all the time. So these are some of the things that we use. BCS is this little walk-behind tractor, two-wheeled walk-behind tractor. Probably overkill for most people. The broad fork here, which is the tool that those volunteers are using to lift and loosen the soil, that is my favorite gardening tool. If I had one gardening tool that I could buy, I would get the broad fork. This particular model is the Meadow Creature broad fork. Meadow Creature is a company up in the Northwest, and they make an all metal, totally indestructible broad fork, and it's awesome. They will also donate a broad fork, which is about a $200 value. They will donate a broad fork to 501c3 nonprofits that are doing gardening activities. And we had one donated here. We ended up buying 5 more. They donated one to the food bank. They also donated one to the church food pantry that I'm involved with. And they're great tools. Hand tools, container gardens, there's a kind of a spectrum, right? Of if you're going to be growing an acre, you might want to look at getting some mechanized equipment. If you're going to be doing something on your patio, you're going to probably be able to just, of course, stick with hand tools. Labor, we have about 2,500 volunteer hours per year here at the food bank on our essentially half acre of production vegetables. That is in addition to a full-time staff member and temporary 10-week full-time summer help and ongoing interns at about 15 hours a week. So it's a lot of work to grow food. It's not something that 2 people are going to be able to do once a month, right? We get volunteers through our volunteer resources team. We have a whole department of people that are out there recruiting volunteers. It has not been a problem for us to recruit volunteers. I understand that that is not maybe representative of most people's experience. Most of the volunteers that come into the garden they come one time, and about 5% of the volunteers come every week. And so finding those people who are really interested in it and devoted to it is awesome. I would be curious, Becca, or honestly, any other people that are watching the presentation, if they have thoughts on how to recruit volunteers for smaller gardens.
Greg, I know that there's a couple community gardens in the Fort Worth area that use websites like Volley Now, where you can post different opportunities. Facebook has been pretty effective. And then if you're part of a church or a community organization that has other groups that reach out to them, like Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, school groups, corporate groups, that's always a good way to get volunteers. So also maybe borrowing from larger organizations. Like I know sometimes if we can't host a large group, we may refer them to another garden in the area. We've got another comment that says high school and college student group organizations can be helpful as well, sororities, fraternities, even as like a service learning, something they can learn how to, learning about gardening while they're volunteering as well. Definitely.
I will say,
projects. Go ahead.
One person coming 50 times is way better than 50 people coming one time. So that's something to think about.
Yeah, and we also have another comment here that we've gotten more interest from the community because people are bored at home right now. And we found that as well. People are asking for what they can do to help right now. And I know right now at our food bank, the only opportunities we have are for outdoor events. So at the Learning Garden or at our farmers market program. So, you might try posting something. People are definitely looking for something to do right now.
Mm-hmm. So harvest windows, I touched on. Some crops, you have a long time in which you can harvest them. So winter squash, beets, kale, carrots, peppers, garlic, onion. What this means is that, if you can't get there on Tuesday, you can come back on Friday and it'll be fine. It's not gonna go bad in the field in between then. Shorter window, harvest window crops, things like green beans, snap peas, salad greens, radish, those really can go from peak ideal readiness, ripeness, time to get it, to overgrown, be it kind of tough and stringy or lose their flavor or get real pithy in the case of the radish. And that actually can happen in a matter of days and sometimes even just like a day. So think about your harvest window because life is complicated. We get busy, we're doing stuff, and sometimes we can't get out there to harvest exactly when we want to. Post-harvest handling, food handling is important. We don't have to go too overboard on this. I don't know if anybody's ever told you this. You should wash your hands. Yeah, wash your hands with soap and water. Goes a long way. Wash your harvest containers and tools. And this is something that when I was apprenticing on farms, I hate to say it, but we didn't wash stuff very much. And so it's something that I had to learn the importance of doing. And, it matters because people are going to eat this stuff. And the thing is, hunger, income insecurity, poverty, health complications, they all go hand in hand. And so many of the people that are going to get this food have compromised or weakened immune systems. And something that may not make you sick could really be problematic for somebody else. So you want to be very careful with this stuff. Give people the best thing that you can. Imagine that they're a guest coming to your home and that you're wanting to prepare a meal for them. You want to give them the best thing that you can. That's really important. Becca, yes.
We have another question. And y'all, when you chat in the box, make sure that you're chatting to all panelists and attendees so everybody can see your question as well. We have a question. Donald would like to know if you have a document that is that you could share about how to fertilize particular crops and when to feed them, or if if AgriLife or Extension Services has something like that.
Yeah, I do not have that. So what I would suggest, I'm not trying to avoid the question entirely, maybe a little bit, but focus on the health of your soil and allow the soil and the plant to communicate with each other about their mutual needs. And that sounds a little bit kind of woo-woo. So let me explain what I mean by that. If you have soil with lots of organic matter, you're using good compost, you put some organic fertilizer in when you plant your crops, you're probably not going to need to worry about fertility that much. That's a broad statement, and there are obviously exceptions to that. But I have found that if I'm getting into a mindset where I want to be doing targeted applications of fertilizer on specific crops, then that tells me that I've gone astray and that I need to refocus more on the garden as kind of an ecosystem as opposed to the garden as a machine to produce food. I would be curious if anybody else has comments on that. Becca, do you have any comments on that? Or
my comments would probably be the same as yours. That's how we tend to garden as well, fostering a garden ecosystem rather than worrying too much about specific nutrients. Most soils contain a lot of nutrients that your plants need to be able to grow. It's a matter of accessing those nutrients, and the things you mentioned, like replenishing with compost and improving your soil quality, will help those as well. And I know that Michael Higgins is on this call as well. He's commenting here. The Natural Resource Conservation Service has some good resources. Michael's a soil specialist, and so really getting that soil healthy will help mitigate a lot of problems, pests and fertility problems. So I think you're right on there.
Yeah, from kind of a micronutrient perspective, your mineral plant nutrients, those you really do, they're either there or they're not, right? Like zinc is either there or it isn't. Boron is either there or it isn't. But with nitrogen, which is usually the kind of most limiting factor for vegetable growth, it's really dynamic. And mostly the availability of nitrogen in your soil is related to carbon and soil organisms, living soil organisms that feed on carbon. And so if you know, going the organic route, the best thing you can do is to use practices that will preserve and increase the vitality of your soil. And I mean vitality, literally the amount of life in your soil. And that over time will create a soil that is higher yielding and more resilient to pests and diseases. So, post-harvest handling, wash your hands. Okay, harvest tools, very, very important. We use these green tubs over here that we have put our logo on. I've bought a lot of those things and they disappear regularly. And so we have kind of been moving away from those because they're fairly expensive. It's up to you, you know, maybe you're growing at a pantry for that pantry and you know that you're going to get it back, but it's been challenging for us. There's a big question in food handling to wash or not to wash. And you know, a lot of the guidance right now from, you know, at an agricultural scale is actually to not wash stuff because washing can spread germs around. Those wet conditions do promote bacterial growth. And kind of psychologically, we can motivate people to wash their food if it looks like it needs to be washed. Washing not only can spread germs on the surface of the food, but due to temperature gradients, if you're using cold water on a warm crop, it'll end up actually sucking that water in. And so if you take a bunch of stuff and put it into a water bath like lettuce, oftentimes people want to take their head of lettuce and dunk it. If you're taking relatively warm lettuce and dunking it into cooler water, and you're doing that again and again with lots of heads of lettuce, it'll actually end up sucking that moisture into the crop. Melons are especially prone to this as well. And so some of the outbreaks that we've seen with listeria and stuff with melons are due to this internalization. But we want people to eat the food. If it's ugly, they're not going to take it. And then it goes to waste. So we do wash stuff sometimes. And we use just regular kind of plain Clorox Bleach as a sanitizer. Something about like 2 tablespoons for 5 gallons of water. Put it in there for 20 seconds and then rinse it off. It's very important. You got to rinse that off with fresh potable water. And please don't take your freshly sanitized thing and then put it into a common bath of dirty water. That doesn't do anybody any good. Chlorine bleach, the production of chlorine bleach is not in any way environmentally benign, but if you dump it out on the ground, it dissipates really fast. It's not going to create a long-term pollution hazard. The other thing about food handling and storage, yeah, you can use acetic acid vinegar, but you have to use it in incredibly high proportions, so it's very expensive. But you can use that. And I will say this, concentrated acetic acid is very dangerous. Just because we use it to make pickles and stuff, concentrated acetic acid it can be really dangerous. So you got to be careful with that. Once your food gets refrigerated, it has to stay that way. If you donate to the food bank, they will refrigerate everything, right? And some stuff doesn't like that. You don't actually have to refrigerate a lot of things. They're not growing in the refrigerator, so they don't necessarily need it to stay alive. And that's what freshness is preserving the livingness of the produce. And so you can see over here in this picture, this is at just a little produce stand. They've got their carrots, kohlrabi, onions, kale, cabbages. It's not refrigerated. Now your storage life is going to be very low. Maybe it only lasts a day that way. But if you don't have refrigeration, it's okay. Just harvest in the morning, put it out on the same day that people are going to take it. Keep it cool-ish, in the shade or in the AC. Things to do to extend the life. would be to pull the tops off of your root crops like beets and carrots. And it just slows down the transpiration of water. This table, I've pulled University of Georgia. It's showing ideal temperature and humidity ranges for storage of different crops. It's something to be aware of, right? If you have eggplant and okra, it needs to be fairly warm. No lower than 50 degrees. Below 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and they start to lose quality very quickly. Other things are going to lose quality if they get too warm, right? So in conclusion, yes, I think you should grow a donation garden. Start small, grow things that are easy to handle, that store well, people like to eat, that you can harvest across a long period of time. And then in terms of food safety, wash everything that comes into contact with the food. Think about whether or not it's going to be appropriate for you to wash the food itself, and look at your storage. So here's some more resources. This is a cool donation garden toolkit that I found from Iowa State, and it was really quite good, better than this presentation. So if nothing else, click on that link. This I found is a website to search for local pantries that take garden produce. Could work both ways. If you have a pantry and you want garden produce, go ahead and sign up there. And then this is the company that makes the broad fork that I mentioned. So that's the last slide that I have. Does anybody have any questions or?
Any final questions? I thought we had a great conversation today. Wonderful questions and comments from the group. Chuck is saying that Ample Harvest in the past has donated seeds for them. So that's another great resource.
Cool.
I know I enjoyed all the information, even though we do a lot of the same stuff here at Tarrant Area Food Bank. You can also, if you're looking for a pantry to donate to, most of the food banks have some sort of search function on their website, so you can find pantries in your area. I know that, like Greg had mentioned, connect with that pantry, see when they distribute food, see if they distribute often enough to be able to take your fresh produce, and connect with them on what their clients would like to take. Definitely some relationship building there. So any final questions? Otherwise, y'all know this will be recorded and posted tomorrow with the rest of the conference content. I will send out a follow-up email after this, and I think I will include the chat log from this as well, because there was a lot of great conversation on here and a lot of resources shared. So that way y'all can connect with each other afterwards too. Greg, Maggie would like to know, where did you find the temperature chart you presented on the third to last slide? Was that Georgia?
Yeah, here we go. It is University of Georgia Cooperative Extension. I don't know how to, I don't have a link for it handy, but.
Okay, so University of Georgia Cooperative Extension, they have a lot of great stuff. They do a lot with food. They also do a lot of food preservation information as well. So that they have, I'm sure if you go there, you will find a lot more information than you want, but all very good quality stuff. All right, if we don't have any final questions, oh, what variety of watermelon do you grow?
Yeah.
They look small.
They were small, they are small. Yeah, I'll show you how small they are. It's called Little Baby Flowers. And bear with me. They get really kind of bizarrely small, actually.
Do they ripen pretty quickly?
Normal? I don't know.
Do they walk away from the garden less often?
Yeah.
That's good.
We have a big fence. You see that?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that one was super tiny, but it still tasted good. So I think that's too small.
Like a half a serving.
Yeah, but I think the ideal watermelon size is something about like this big of cantaloupe, about the size of a cantaloupe, or maybe a little smaller, because it doesn't take so much room up in the fridge.
Chuck wants to know what voltage your fence is.
No, there's no voltage.
Fence or no fence, things still walk away unless you're just super remote. But yeah,
we have very little problem with that. Just like over the course of the last 3-4 years, like maybe 2 instances where somebody was kind of messing with the garden.
Yeah, definitely location makes a difference. I know y'all are kind of in an industrial area, whereas we're in a neighborhood. So yeah, Dawn was saying she's had people steal her plants. Y'all should attend Lauren's session today at 3 o'clock. She's going to talk about problems into possibilities, where we will talk about lots of different issues that come up in community gardens. So I know y'all will enjoy that. There's a question as well, if your last slide there, Greg, with all of your info will be available. If you want to, can you pull that up again, just real quick?
Sure.
But yes, it will be on the recording tomorrow as well. So we've got lots of thank yous for you, Greg, for a wonderful presentation. I want to thank y'all for joining us today as Greg's pulling up his contact slide here. Again, the recording will be available tomorrow with the rest of the conference sessions. And we've got 2 more live sessions today at 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock. So if you're not registered on Eventbrite for those yet, go ahead and do that so you can join us. And hopefully we'll see you at tomorrow's breakout sessions and virtual lunch as well. Got that up there, Greg? Oh yeah, there we go. Good resource page. Greg's email is there, and again, it'll be available tomorrow, and I will follow up with y'all shortly too after this session is done. So thank you so much, and we will see you again soon.
Okay, thank you all so much for your time. I appreciate it. I wish I could see you all in person, maybe next year.
All right, y'all stay safe.